is where you willfully mislead somebody, knowing that what you're saying is factually incorrect.
I think I lie very well for my profession.
What does a liar look like? What does a psychopath look like?
I just want to say I hope there's a lot of criminals listening to this. You'll be picking up some good tips.
Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Steve. Yourself?
Just for the listeners, Brad's sitting there with a nice little red tea cozy on his head, keeping his head warm, and it makes you look very homely. I've got this vision of you sitting at home knitting or something, or crocheting or something.
No, I wore it specifically today, Steve, because I just thought that if there was a crime and you were interviewing witnesses, I was just wondering if they'd all agree. There was a guy with a red beanie, because it's very red, isn't it? It's
yes.
It might be the only thing they agreed upon.
Very true, very true.
And there may have been a crime because the police helicopter, as I arrived here, was hovering above us, right, which always makes me wonder whether or not there's people running around with guns and they're trying to spot them.
Well, I mean, they get Air 490, or the Air Wing as they call them, get tasked to a lot of jobs, everything from, surveillance jobs, because they can fly quite high, very quiet sound. And I remember being up in the Air 490 chopper several times, once getting violently sick, and I asked the pilot, why do you keep doing circles? He goes, much more expensive to hover in a stationary position. And I'm thinking, great. And I asked where the sick bags are. But what blew me away was the FLIR night vision equipment they had. They could zoom up to a rego plate from several kilometres, and like the clarity and obviously the thermal imaging. So a lot of crooks think that they can outrun a helicopter, and they can't hear it, they can't see it of a night time. And even to watch how, the Air Wing would direct the troops to where someone was hiding, under a box, behind a tree, inside a house or something, was amazing. And they often thought they could outrun it. But what blew me away was how visible it is, the amount of heat that, and even when I was in the job and Air 490 was called and they go, no, not that street, no, the next street, turn left here, So it's almost like we just honed in on where we're going because they could see everything.
That's amazing. So they'd see this beanie for sure without even the night vision.
Well, not so much the beanie, your body heat is what it picks up from a distance.
Anyway.
And your poor taste.
How dare you? All right. So it's going to be an adversarial today.
So one thing we have to clear up from our last episode with Rob Blizzard
Thank you, Rob.
was the task force name. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, well, I think he said Santiago.
Some people misinterpreted it for San Diego.
San Diego. So
as
the difference is
in the US.
San Diego is spelled SAN space DIEGO. And it's in California, south of Los Angeles.
Not a bad place. They have a big Air Force base there.
Big naval base too.
Yeah.
And and marine base because of Navy. And so I think it's quite close to the Mexican border.
Yes, it is. Right. In fact, Tijuana, across the border.
And anyway, Santiago, which I believe the task was named after,
correct,
is SANTIAGO. San Diego.
I feel like I'm in the middle of a spelling bee.
It's just I like to give people clarity because this is how this all came about.
Yeah.
Simply because somebody couldn't discern the difference between a D and a T. Like when people say important.
Well,
when it's important.
Yeah, exactly. But they, to be fair, they do sound alike. But it all comes down to the pronunciation.
And San Diego, of course, is in South America. And, you think I would have checked to see, but I think it's out.
I didn't think you needed to check. I think you knew.
I think I knew. I think I forgot. But that's happening increasingly as I go older. I will get back to you about that. So
let's talk about today.
All right. Well, today, it's been overdue, hasn't it?
It has. We've been skirting around the edges. Everyone, and I get this a lot in responses to my TikToks. And what about politicians? What about governments lying? They tell the biggest lies. And it's interesting because I found one of two things. One is either we are directly lied to, or as we see in a lot of press conferences, when the direct questions are thrown towards politicians, they'll sidestep the issue. They won't answer it. They'll answer with another question, or they'll answer it with a question they want, doesn't even relate. Their answer doesn't even relate to what the question is. And we see that. Basically, they sidestep the issue.
Yeah, so there's a word, I don't... well, first of all, just to let you know, I've remembered that Santiago is, of course, the capital of Chile in South America. But I wanted to use one of my favourite words, obfuscation. And I will spell this, right, because you should check it out if you don't know it. obfuscation, obfuscation.
That's 5 points in a spelling bee.
It's a great word because it's the act of making something unclear, confusing, or difficult to understand, usually on purpose. My go-to there would be perhaps parking signs in the city of Stonington.
Oh, don't get me going.
Yeah, where you just basically you have to have
a PhD to understand
in philosophy and mathematics to understand what's going on.
Why can't they just clarify it? That's a great example, by the way.
Yeah, well, it is. It's obfuscation, and it's
annoying.
As well as to I'll get your opinion on this before we get into the nuts and bolts of today. I wonder when I'm dealing with somebody over the telephone, in a service situation, and they have an almost an accent that makes it very difficult for me. I have a policy which is if I say I beg your pardon more than 10 times, I say I need to speak to somebody else.
Yeah. This is a communication issue.
Yeah, and
so we're talking about even AI doesn't do that.
Yeah,
I mean, does, but not to the same extent. Talking to somebody who has a very poor grasp of the English language.
Well, maybe a great grasp of the English language, but a poor delivery of the English language. But
you've got to be able to understand to communicate, though.
Well, that's it. But see, given that I think there's rarely any problems in the world, anything that happens to me, I think to myself, well, surely I'm not the first person this has happened to. And so I think that this has happened to a lot of people. And well, I'll tell you another one, which is paper bags in supermarkets. They break.
They do.
They because they don't say how much you can put in them. They foolishly put too much in them. They break. Why do we put up with this? Anyway, this is.
What about straws? Why can we not have straws? But every second item in a supermarket is wrapped in plastic.
I don't know, but you need to learn to make straws out of plastic yourself. It's an art. You need a cigarette lighter, a pencil, and a bit of time. Anyway, so beg your pardon. So obfuscation, is this what you're talking about? Quite often, if you get a flat no from a politician, I tend to say to myself, well, that's possibly true because it's indefensible. But if you get a varied answer, an obfuscational answer, you think to yourself, well, what are you concealing here?
But more recently here in Australia, the budget night, where all these memes on television have become on social media, all that type of thing, with our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, making very clear initially that there will be no changes to capital gains tax, there will be no changes to discretionary trusts, all that type of thing. They were pretty definitive answers to those questions. Then later on, and several times he said, how many times do I have to tell you this? How many times? There will be no... Now, that's quite a definitive response. Now, of course, since then, those have changed, and there is the changes to capital gains and discretionary funds. And what's happening now is he's saying, our position has changed.
Wow.
So let's go back to the definition of a lie. Is that a lie? Now, in my view, a definition of a lie is where you willfully mislead someone knowing what you're saying is factually incorrect. Now, and that's a great defence, really, when you think, and we see this with a lot of politicians speak. They'll say, circumstances have changed and all the rest of it. So I guess if I say to you, I didn't eat your Mars bar, and I did, that's a pretty clear-cut direct lie.
Yeah.
Right? But if I said to you, the Mars bar's missing and, times have changed, I'm not really answering the question about whether or not I stole or ate your Mars bar. So politicians are very adept at being flexible because they know everything they say is being taped, recorded, all that type of thing. So they've got to be very careful because there's always footage somewhere about them saying whatever they've said. So now we're seeing a bit of backtracking and, our position has changed. So is that a lie in itself?
Yeah, well, but I understand that, but I'll give you great examples of some of the constraints that they're working under, which was during the pandemic when there was no stand-up comedy. I went and worked in the Victorian Department of Health for 20 months as a COVID, mainly initially as a COVID advisor on the telephone because of my very clear way of explaining things. And we would, because it was a movable feast and there would be new legislations, determinations every day. Some days, 3 different sets of determinations.
Yeah.
And what would happen is it would be decided in Parliament or in Cabinet, and then the new regulations would come to us, but they would get sidetracked to the lawyers.
Yeah.
And the lawyers would go, yes, this. And then somebody would have to write that into notes. We were given slides, and then we have to tell people. And because these things you just can't anticipate everything. You might say, well, nobody's going to be affected. And then find out, well, yeah, actually all the people who live, 21 kilometres out are going to be affected. So
is it more a matter of talking in generalities and not tying yourself to a particular response?
Well, I guess there is, but I think that it's become so involved that it's also become a tactic to constantly pick away at somebody so that you will make them almost tell a lie. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's very hard to absolutely pin. If you enact something in Parliament, and it turns out to be 70,000 words, that's a very difficult thing to answer questions on, particularly if you've got a vested interest and you say, we're going to give 10 people 6,000 words each to go through and look for inconsistencies, and we'll attack. I'm not defending the lie. I'm not denying the lying, but I'm just saying that I think we've created perhaps a culture where this is endemic and embedded.
And shortly we will look at some of the biggest lies. But, I guess governments, and I have no background in government. I know you have a little bit of background there. But is it okay to lie when it comes to national security? Is it okay to lie when it comes to maintaining a peaceful and orderly society?
Well,
are there acceptable lies?
Well, I'd throw that back at you. That surely in police investigations, where there is a press conference. I don't know if you've done press conferences.
Yes.
As a police officer.
Yes. Both.
And you would go in there, and I'm sure you would say, "I have areas I cannot speak about."
Correct. That's more lying. Well, okay. You've got to take it from that investigative perspective. Let's say I'm in possession of information that only the killer or the offender would know.
Yep.
That's my trump card.
Yep.
And you don't want to have copycats come up and admit, involvement or responsibility. And that's the trump card that you may have that could differentiate between whether or not somebody is involved or not involved. So I don't know if that would be a lie, But if I was to turn it back to, let me give you a great example. Now, our listeners may or may not agree with what I'm about to say.
Uh-huh.
But in the police, the worst job you could ever do, in my opinion, was deliver a death message.
Okay.
And because I remember very clearly when I went through the academy, they said, establish identity, make sure it's the number one.
I know what you're going to say.
Yep.
Yeah.
Once you've established identity, and then it all comes down to words. So I used to hate when members would say, your husband has been involved in a fatal collision. Sorry, your husband's been fatally injured, I should say. Now, of course, people will hang on to the injured, and I was always very direct. I'd say, unfortunately, your husband's been killed in an accident.
Say killed or deceased?
Either or.
Okay.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, it comes down to, of course, you want to be as empathetic as possible. Uh-huh. It wasn't lost on me that, and I did several of them, that you would go in there and you're literally changing people's lives. But now, this is what people may or may not agree. I remember going to a particular job where the person was in, the deceased was in an amazing amount of pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. And invariably the first question was, did they suffer? And I used to say, no.
Yeah. Now,
do they need to know that?
Yeah. Well,
is that a lie?
And at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a lie. But Professor Paul Ekman would call that a pro-social lie.
Yeah.
And that is that it's not for me to get an advantage or a benefit or anything. And I'm sure doctors do that on a daily basis. Not just doctors, many occupations. But the point is there are lies or acceptable lies. Then there are other lies to support an initiative or an argument.
Say before you do
that,
of course. I know that with my doctor because I said to my doctor, do these jeans make my bum look big? And I think they lied.
Why are you asking your doctor that question?
Well, that's I figured that if I was going to get the truth from anybody.
Well, you see, but really,
they did say I can't be your doctor anymore. Anyway.
Or your fashion consultant. But yeah, so I think the reality is there are good lies, if you want to call it, without taking religions into effect and all that type of thing. And then there are more protective lies people tell and then there are bad lies.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't know why people expect, governments not to lie. I mean, historically, we look, and I don't care what side of politics you're on, there will always be incidents of where we are lied to.
Yeah.
And misled.
Yeah.
Now, whether that be national security, whether that be for to protect people, or whether it be to protect the politician's backside, we're lied to, and there have been many cases in history. We're going to talk about a couple of them now.
Yeah, let's get in them.
Where governments have lied to us.
Yeah, and indeed, and again, we've identified a few. We've kept it local.
Yeah.
So do you want to lead off on the first one?
Sure. Well, let's talk about one I was actually involved in, and that was what we called here in Australia the Children Overboard Scandal. So in the lead up to the 2001 Australian federal election, there were senior government ministers, including the Prime Minister and the Minister for Immigration, that stated asylum seekers aboard a vessel had deliberately thrown their children into the ocean to force the Navy to rescue them.
Yep.
The story received, widespread, attention,
front page
and coverage for a long period of time. And anyway, subsequent investigations found that there was no evidence that parents had intentionally thrown their children overboard. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I remember John Howard, the Prime Minister of the day, and Peter Reith said, there's evidence that children were being thrown overboard. Now, my involvement there was very quickly. There was a guy by the name of Mike Scrafton, who was senior public servant, was asked, got a phone call. I know because I interviewed him and conducted a polygraph test on him. he was asked, he got a phone call from Peter Reith, who was the Minister for Immigration at the time, and said, look, I'm here with the Prime Minister. Can you go down to a naval dock, Garden Island, I think it is, the naval docklands in New South Wales or Sydney.
Sydney Harbour. Yeah.
You'll be met there by a Commodore and they'll get you to look at some tapes. We just want to know whether or not there's any evidence of children being thrown overboard.
Could I just make it clear for people, Commodore is a rank in the Navy, not a
very
popular,
senior rank.
Not a popular car from the 70s.
And anyway, so he goes and views these videotapes and he said there's absolutely no evidence that he saw that children were being thrown overboard. And by the way, there's never been any evidence to substantiate that children were being thrown overboard in an effort to gain status into Australia. And that was from our Prime Minister.
Well, there's some the background I've got is there was some beautiful inference in it, because what they did was they had pictures of children on a boat and they had pictures of children in the water. Mm-hmm. But they had no pictures of anybody engaged in the throwing of a child. Mm-hmm. But the inference was, how do you reckon the kids got in the water? Ergo, they must have been thrown. Mm. And that's really the disgrace of it, was that this was so manufactured and so exposed. Mm. So
and let's not forget, it was the leading into the election, and the government was tough on immigration. Yeah, that's the image they wanted to portray. But the fact was the detail and the facts were different to what we were told.
Well, can I just point out, and just as a little bit of light relief, when I was about 5 years old, mm-hmm. my father, who was a very good swimmer, took us kids down to Nuttawading Pool. Yeah. And in order for me to swim, he threw me into the Nuttawading Pool.
How'd that work out?
And, well, I died, clearly. And, yeah, that wasn't in the papers. No. Yeah, that's Children Overboard. Come on. Yeah. Anyway,
bit of a different context, but yeah, I get what
your involvement in this this post-exposure was?
Yeah, so I was asked to do a polygraph test and an interview of Scrafton as to whether or not he was lying about what he saw. He passed the test because he said he did not see.
Who asked you to do it, by the way?
Laurie Oakes, who is a well-known politician.
No relation, by the way.
I gotcha. But yeah, and he passed. So that was one. Let's go more international, the Iraq War.
Okay.
Prior to the invasion of Iraq, political leaders in several countries asserted that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and posed an imminent threat. Now, included statements that, Iraq possessed chemical and biological weapons, was actively pursuing nuclear weapons and could rapidly deploy certain weapons. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I remember watching, don't quote me, I think it was Colin Powell, and he was talking about, they had satellite images of this building that said, that's where the weapons have been produced. So I thought, okay, they must have pretty good intel, which, CIA and operatives and all that sort of stuff.
I'm surprised they didn't have a sign in English saying weapons of mass destruction factory.
Yeah, but what transpired was, after the invasion, extensive searches found no stockpiles of alleged weapons. And several official inquiries concluded that the intelligence had been overstated, interpreted with excessive certainty, or relied on flawed sources.
See, that's going to be one of the most beautiful sentences of all time. What was it? Interpreted with excessive certainty?
Well,
is that what you said?
No.
What was it?
I said intelligence had been overstated, interpreted with excessive certainty.
Yeah.
So that's like saying this has got to be true.
What a sentence. That's an excessive certainty.
It's like this cannot be faulted.
That's the equivalent of saying really, really, really. Excessive certainty.
Yeah, exactly. But and to what extent? I don't know if you remember, but Bush tried to incorporate other countries into the coalition of the willing, if you remember, saying yes. And, of course, other countries jumped on the bandwagon. And
I think it was Blair that...
or not Australia.
But I think that it was in order to create a line, a line doesn't form until the second person steps into the line.
Yeah.
That's otherwise it's not a line.
Yeah.
And now it's become a line. And so that's why history and people are so down on Blair. But I got the skinny here on how it started our unraveling. The first problem was remarkably simple. After Iraq was invaded, nobody could find the weapons. Okay. We're not sure how big they are, but, they did search everywhere. Inspectors searched, months passed, 10 years, no active WMD stockpiles were discovered. But the most telling thing that nobody mentions is in the whole act of aggression, they didn't use them. Right?
Well, that's an interesting point.
They didn't use them, which to me is a major, major red flag. If they had them, they would have used them. So
if you don't withdraw your troops, we're going to let it go. We're going to let it go.
Yeah. You don't have it's like Get Smart, isn't it? You don't have.
Would you believe?
You don't have any WND.
Remember, it was at Jaime, not Jaime, not Control, whoever the bad guys were.
Chaos.
Thank you. And it reminded me of the episode where he says, we have 100 agents surrounding this building. And he goes, iPhones, that's hard to believe. He says, would you believe 10? No. And would you believe a Boy Scout and an angry German Shepherd?
Well, this is one of my favourite names too. Weapons inspectors raise questions. Before the invasion, weapons inspectors from the UN were already doubting it. One of the prominent figures was, his name is Hans Blix, H-A-N-S,
right.
and Blix, B-L-I-X. Blix repeatedly argued that the inspections should continue because inspectors had not found convincing evidence of active WND programs.
You keep looking until you find, is that right?
Well, exactly.
There's nothing to find. What are you looking for?
Well, at what point do you go in hide and seek? Do you go, look, we're in danger of losing the child forever here? You get them to come out. You've got to, at some point, well, again, a serious question. At what point do you call off a search?
Are we talking about search for weapons, or are we talking off as a search for someone who's missing?
Somebody has to deem that the search is redundant.
Well, and I remember in the initial stages there were rumours coming out through the media that they refused inspectors access to certain sites. So therefore, if 1 and 1 leads to 4, well then what are they hiding?
Yeah.
So and of course that comes down to media reporting and whatnot as well. But
there was one particularly embarrassing moment when the British government released an intelligence report. Dossier. A journalist discovered that parts of it appeared to have been copied from academic work and other public sources. The press nicknamed it the dodgy dossier. We love a bit of alliteration.
Well, that's like modelling. Like they'll say, modelling will dictate A, B, and C. But
sorry, you mean modelling as in modelling?
Yeah, like
not me walking down the catwalk.
No, definitely not with that red tea cozy on your head. But something like modelling for the polar ice caps. What will happen in 5 years, or the water levels will rise. Well, it's modelling, right? It's based on past events, I guess, and obviously there's much more to it. But the point is you create an alliance, you create a fear, you act on that fear, and you try to gain or garnish support by the community or the country. And of course, we're being fed what we think may be true. We don't always know what's true.
All right, and and we'll save this for another day, but which leads to, it said that the press nicknamed it the dodgy dossier. The thing is, the press went along with this initially.
Don't the press go on? Well, depends on your political affiliations, doesn't it? The press go with whatever they think.
No, well, not even that. These days, that's probably a little bit early. But then these days of clickbait, I think that the press don't seem to really give a rat's ass about what's true anymore. It's just about what people will deem to be true. Anyway.
So once upon a time when I was growing up and you were growing up, the media would report things. Now they're giving us their opinions on what they think. So it's very left, very right, all that type of thing. So somehow we have to extract what's true out of what we're being told.
Okay, so we now know that it's been totally repudiated. It's been totally discredited.
We were misled.
Yeah, we're misled. But I just want people to realise, and again, without getting political, we were misled, and that led to the deaths of a lot of people for no other reason than we were misled.
Misinformation.
Which leads us into
the next one.
Which
is here in Australia we had a system that was introduced by the Liberal government under Scott Morrison, our former Prime Minister, called Robodebt.
Was he Prime Minister when Robodebt came in? Was he the Minister for...
good question. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure our producer will look that up.
Yeah.
But for years, the Australian government defended what we call the Robodebt program, which automatically calculated alleged welfare debts using income averaging. Now, effectively, officials repeatedly maintained that the system was lawful, the debts being raised were valid, and the recovery process was appropriate. So the whole system, people were getting letters of demand from the government saying, you owe this, you owe that. And it turns out, and just through a recent case decision here in Australia, that Robodebt and the way the government of the time went about trying to enforce this, and by the way, it was almost like a reverse onus. You prove to us what you owe. And some of the problems that we had was that the government conceded the income averaging method alone could not lawfully establish many debts. More than 470,000 debts were refunded, and around 1.8 billion was repaid to collected Australians. And they introduced a royal commission into the scheme and found the scheme was unlawful and criticised repeated public and internal representations defending it. Okay. So the problem is you've got people, and there were mistakes made in how these things were calculated. You know, how much, in some cases, people who were on, welfare benefits or whatever were falsely accused of, receiving benefits when they shouldn't have and all the rest, and were made or, demanded payback.
Well, just for a little bit of background, just for any of our overseas listeners, Prime Minister, who's the head of state in Australia, the Prime Minister that the policy was developed under until 2015 was Tony Abbott, Liberal National Party. Then from September 2015 to 2018, Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister, and I believe he was convinced to introduce it. Robodebt was formally implemented and expanded during his government, and then Scott Morrison, August 2018 onwards, the scheme continued until it was abandoned in 2019 after legal challenges. Now, I point out, not legal challenges.
Several.
They consistently try to bat it away. But what we're looking at in this podcast is the deceit that surrounds it, not necessarily the policy, because people said from the get-go, this policy is bullshit. And the lies that surround it. It was an ongoing system that continued operating for years after legal and factual doubts had emerged. The central question became not who told the first lie, but why do so many people keep defending the story? Now, some of the lies, there was a lie about the existence of the scheme, misleading statements used to defend the scheme, and there was a royal commission, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
It did not conclude that ministers stood up and said, we know this is unlawful, but we were doing it anyway.
We did it correct anyway. Right.
Yeah, yep. And But yeah, that's, the Royal Commission decided something that we know now is, yes, they did. How did they lie? The debts are accurate. The public was repeatedly assured the debt notices were legitimate and based on reliable information.
Yeah, but look, the methodology in which the debts were calculated were flawed.
And people knew that. And so this is the thing. This is the transference of a lie because there's a hierarchy. You've got, for those who don't know, you've got a minister who is the ultimate you've got the Prime Minister who's the ultimate decider, but you've got the minister who runs the department. I believe it was Scott Morrison at the time. And then following that, you've got all the people who work for Scott Morrison. At what point do you say, well, I have
this
to
is not a good idea.
I've in past jobs I've had to tell lies. I've had to
tell lies.
Yeah, I've had to change the truth. But I've had to accentuate the certainty.
But let's look at this example. As a result of people being accused of, receiving benefits when they shouldn't have, it had other repercussions, and that people were self-harming, and there were cases where I believe there was suicide and all sorts of things. Now, this is the consequence of a government lying to us.
Okay, so look, I looking into this, the findings of the Royal Commission, and just in a nutshell, there were plenty, but this is they included references to misleading the cabinet processes. Okay, so that's lying amongst
the very legislators themselves,
right? Misleading public communications. Okay, so
that's another lie because it's got to come out to the media and through press releases. That's lie number 2.
Misleading explanations provided to the courts. That's perjury.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah. And failures to fully disclose legal concerns. They had advice.
Yep.
And they went ahead and did it anyway.
Correct.
Yeah. But, look, without pillaring Scott Morrison too much, this is the man who went on and appointed himself to several ministries. Anyway, a bureaucratic lie. I will tell people something technically defensible while omitting the crucial facts that would change their understanding. It's a lie.
Well, we see similarity. What we're just talking about, Iraq, Children Overboard. So it's the government knowing what they're probably saying is factually incorrect, but still saying it, and then trying to support it and doing it anyway.
Right. So how would we then, if this was happening now, and we knew we know what you can do. You are the human lie detector. How would we use you in this situation to detect these lies, to uncover this?
But see, it comes down to if you have information and you're not disclosing that information, then are you lying or are you just evading?
Yeah. Okay.
So if there's nothing to analyse, only based on the fact of what we've been provided, and we have been, fed crumbs here and there. Of course, think about the legislators who are putting it all together. They know, and you can be as fastidious as you like about analysing behaviour of that, but when it comes to governments determining what you or what they think you should know, often we're pretty helpless, aren't we?
Okay, so and to look at that, you're saying there that of course you can't do anything about what they're omitting because you don't know.
Well, of course, if they're not, if I'm interviewing you and then you've said this, and I find all these contradictions and all that sort of stuff, I then go looking for evidence and all that. It's a little bit difficult for the average schmo out there to have a contact within the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and or you've got someone who's a whistleblower and says, this is rubbish, and that's how sometimes things do come out.
Eventually, they were lying. And we found there was evidence found that they absolutely, particularly where they said they didn't receive the legal advice.
Oh, they received it.
Yeah, they
Make
did.
no mistake.
Yeah, and so would that be, somewhere that would be your ambit?
Well, it depends what's out in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's not out in the public domain, they've been evasive, omissive, dismissive, not answering the questions. We've seen that with a lot of politicians. Then what have we got to work with? See, we are fed what our governments think we need to know.
Right.
And often in some, big contracts, it's commercial in confidence. We can't disclose that. So, and that's why here in Victoria at the moment, I really want to hear what the IBAC investigation, Independent Anti-Broad-Based Commission, report on corruption here in Victoria involving unions and the government. What is the extent? So this is a investigation that was funded by people like you and me, the average Victorian, and now a public report is being fought about being released. How have we reached that stage?
Okay. All right. So notwithstanding that, just in terms of your expertise, if you're watching a politician on television talking about one of these issues, all right, are your spidey senses tingling? Are you watching them just going, oh, that's not true?
All the time.
Yeah.
And you know what? You don't need my skill sets to work out. There's probably not a day or a couple of days you don't sit there and listen to a politician and think, no, it doesn't sound right. Or why is he or she not answering the question? Why is it buffering around the major issue? Why are they sidestepping? I see it all the time. But at the end of the day, I would love. I got to be honest with you. When our former Premier Daniel Andrews was responsible for the COVID, initiatives and plans and lockdowns and that. There are many times I wanted to be in one of those press conferences so I could actually ask direct questions. And I think the other thing is I think journalists need to really, not just ask the right questions, but if they're not answering those questions, and we saw this just recently with Albanese, Prime Minister, then ask them the direct questions. But, we've come to a stage. I read some poll a while ago, and the average person expects our politicians to lie to us.
Okay. Well, look, I think we need to finish up there. I just want to I've got a little tip for people who travel on public transport, particularly in the state of Victoria. Now, you understand in the state of Victoria out there that we have ticket inspectors. They're called Mikey inspectors. All right, who can stop anybody and ask them if they've paid their fare and check that. Now, if you're on a crowded tram and you want to get a seat, right, you can lie and just say, I'm a Mikey inspector. And about 50% of the people will get off that tram because they don't have a ticket. And you will find a seat for you. And that's
what a bad approach. I might have to try that one day.
That's a little service I wanted to introduce to the pod once a week. I'll tell you a lie that doesn't hurt anybody.
Brad's useful lie tips. That'll be a segment.
All right, Steve. Well, I think that is all we've got time for.
Fantastic.
Been great, and I'll see you next week.
You certainly will. All the best. Cheers.
Cheers. I just want to say I hope there's a lot of criminals listening to this. You'll be picking up some good tips.